You're looking at Los Alamitos Yacht Club, and this is the USA SUP National Championship distance race back in November. Yeah, that's right. We're late getting to it. More to come on that. It was an amazing event. Here you're getting a look at the female sprint finals. That's Seychelles and Katniss at the front of the pack, and Seychelles edged her out for an amazing race. Now you're looking at the overhead of the men's Tech Open final start. And this was an amazing race, but not without some drama, and we're going to focus on this because there's a question about rules that I think we as a sport need to solve. Oh, Dave Bainey got a great start. So did Danny.
Oh, beautiful.
Just amazing glide right there, right up to his feet. Those two. So you're looking at the actual coverage from our event the day of. This was me and Harrison Withers calling the open race, and you're seeing the exact screen that if you had logged into YouTube or Facebook or any of our streaming properties, you would have been able to watch this live, which was very cool. Our coverage was pretty good, I like to think. There was some interesting stuff in the end, and we're going to cover that. But let's jump into the racing here as we're watching it. You can see Danny Ching jumped way out in front, and there was no surprise there. Bodie von Allman had already left to go to Thailand for the ICF Championship, so Danny Ching was clearly going to be the class of the field on this day, but Dave Bainey and Jake Graham were clearly going to be the second, third favorites, probably dueling each other, and that's exactly what happened. And you're looking at the second buoy turn here, and sure enough, it shaked out 1, 2, 3. Danny gapped the field very quickly and had a great run as he was clearly salting away victory. And Dave Bainey had an incredibly impressive run as well. Put some mileage in early and gapped Jake, but Jake managed to make up some ground here on this turn. As you can see, Dave Bainey went toe side, Jake went heel side. And now I'm going to cut it over to our live call of the race right after a slight dogleg right turn, and you can see what happens. On the drone, so we get a view of that race for number 2. And this is going to be sporty. These guys are right next to each other. Jake is just on Dave Bainey's tail, and this is going to be a pressure-filled final turn here.
We've got Paul putting a move.
Yeah, Paul is really hammering.
Dennis Gibson.
Yep, I mean, like I said, these guys are going to be racing for pride all the way through the ranks, so we're going to see some pretty great action. So there you see Danny going from right to left. He's in the home stretch, and Harrison and I start really paying attention to him, keeping our eye on the race for second and third place. But critically, we don't see the drone footage from where we're seated. We're watching with our naked eyes, and so keep that in mind as you hear the call, and we're going to dive into some analysis at the end of the race. Swinging back around, and here you see it. Danny's already on his way in.
Danny's on his way in.
Here comes the turn at number 2, and Alex has got a great shot of it on the drone. Jake swinging around right on Dave's tail. Dave hammering home. Jake's in a good spot, but Dave is laying it down. I think he still had some in the tank, and we're about to see if Dave Bainey, 47-year-old Dave Bainey, has it in him, because he has been racing really fast this year. It's been impressive to watch. Here comes Danny. What an amazing display of speed and technical skill. And there's your men's open champion. Coming across the line. Styling for some pictures. Nice job, Danny Ching, our men's open champion. And here comes the drag race for number 2. Jake Graham, Dave Bainey. Look at this. Dave's sort of veering into Jake. Jake's standing up. He sees the contact coming. And these guys are going to have to lay it down. About 80 yards to go. And Jake is pinching Dave off, and this is rubbing his race, and that's some sport. Dave's digging deep. Jake coming with him. I think Dave's got it. Digging way deep. Jake tried to pinch him off. There's your 2 and 3, Dave Bainey holding him off, and that was... So there you see the call, pretty excited as you can imagine. Now watch this back again, though, and you can see from the drone what we really couldn't see well, which is the shallow water. And as these guys come out of the turn, you can see they're dealing with the shallow water. There's Jake in the starboard and Dave on a purple Infinity. And you can see the drone tracking now, and we're going to jump into this footage. And there you can see Dave veering out of the shallow water and beginning to angle Jake off. And we zoom in here, and you can see Jake contact on the rails. And, it's a little bit dicey there. But now watch this. Dave starts swinging over and looks over his shoulder. And let's take a look at that again. Nice little shot of Dave taking a peek, sees Jake, and starts veering over to block his path. Now, we can't see any of this. We're watching Danny finish the race. And Jake makes a really incredible run here and starts to close and catch up and is riding some of that wash. But Dave cuts over at a really acute angle, and Jake has to stand up just anticipating the contact, stays with it. But here you can see they're incredibly shallow water. And Jake later described that he was beginning to ground his paddle out. And you can actually see some debris coming up from the bottom there in a couple of these strokes. Incredibly close race, lots of rubbing. What does it all mean? All right, Matt, we're in. And what does it mean indeed for racing? We're going to get into it. Super fun race. And it's been a long time. First, let's talk about where the hell we've been.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, we've been super busy. Both of us got super busy, like at the same time too. Early fall last year, I think that we were both on the road a lot, and frankly, paddling some. Me probably more than you, but you've been up to some exciting stuff, doing some climbing clinics and that sort of thing.
Yeah, just been bouncing around. Work for both of us kind of takes over as it does for everybody from time to time, and yeah, I'm fortunate that work for me is still getting to be a big kid for the most part. So just was focusing on other sports and took me off the water for a little while. But psyched that at least in the Southeast, things are starting to creep towards spring, starting to feel a little nicer now. So the psych is coming back to be back on the water more often as well. But you guys still had your whole weekly race series through the whole winter, even some frosty days up there. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been on the water, almost every week, sadly, like once a week, but we've got a little pickup race we do here in Seattle on Sunday mornings. And we've had anywhere from I'll say, well, actually on one day when it was 20 degrees, when we hit the water in the morning, it was 4 of us. But we've had as many as 25, and it's just like an early Sunday morning pickup race that we do. But it's like a perfect 5K. So it's pretty fun. And it's like flat, controlled water, which we don't usually paddle on here. So it's a good time. I did though, just last weekend do the Blue Line Surf Shop, winter series race number 2. That was super fun. Because, we've talked about it before, that scene there in Jupiter, but this is a race that Jeremy Vane, who manages the Blue Line shop there, puts on a timed race. I don't think he'd mind me saying, he sort of caved to pressure from a bunch of super competitive people saying, no, we want proper timing and proper race starts and stuff. And it's Jeremy. He did a great job. I got to do one of them, just like serendipitous. I was in the state doing business and headed down. But really cool to just in the middle of winter in Seattle, go out on a probably 75-degree day in Florida.
Yeah, dude.
It's a nice break.
By how many orders of magnitude were you the pastiest person out there?
Really good question. I think just because by DNA I'm like desert people, it wasn't as bad as it might be otherwise.
Okay, could have been worse.
I'm got some Mediterranean stuff going on.
Sure.
You know what's interesting? The Floridians themselves, especially the ones who are into water sports, are actually really smart about keeping the sun off of them. And
that's
so
true.
you don't see just a ton of if you see someone who's super tan, chances are they're a visiting Canadian. Because they're just sucking it in, whereas the locals are like, dude, bad things happen when you're out here too much without protection on.
That's true. Yeah, you do see a lot of folks with the long sleeve stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But 70 people on the water for this race.
That's great.
Super cool.
Early season.
Yeah, super
that's awesome.
Cool. Yeah. So, no, it's been good. Been able to stay on the water, but we haven't been able to find time to record these until just now. And then part 2, and this is where we'll be really into folks' comments. Please let us know. Technically, it was really difficult to produce these before because of the system we're using and just, I think, our shared bandwidth, literal bandwidth of our computers. Being able to analyze video together was really difficult. So we've got this new approach, which if you're watching, you've obviously taken note of if you've seen these before. Let us know what you think. Because it's a lot easier for us just to have, probably me because I'm the editor, do some analysis and pull some stuff up. But clearly you and I have talked about these things beforehand, but not in depth. So let's jump into it. Let's get back to where we jumped off with the race recap. First, let me say the whole weekend was amazing for the USA SUP National Championships. It was so well put on. The crew that was there was great. The races were awesome. And despite what we're going to talk about with a little bit of drama, it was totally cool. Everyone was super good sportsmanship and that kind of stuff. I need to start. I have to apologize to Jake Graham, who we're going to discuss more, Matt. But I went on and on after that race because of my view of the race. I went on and on about sneaky paddle or that kind of stuff on the beach. And he just took it. And then afterwards was and I watched the video. I was like, oh my God, I was completely wrong. Jake's such a gentlemanly paddler, and he was also the guy who set the courses, which were amazing. The course for that tech race, by the way, was perfect. I mean, exactly right at every interval and length. It was so good. And then finally, I also want to say before we jump into it too, despite what you saw in the recap, I don't think that Dave did anything that I haven't done willfully many, many, many times in races. And I suspect that everyone out there watching has done it many, many, many times and would consider it the normal course of racing. It isn't until you see it from above and actually have a conversation about it, like with Jake and Dave, and sort of understand the different viewpoints, you realize like, oh, we might be missing something. So I'll jump off there, and I'm curious what you thought, having seen the drone footage like clean and just being able to like watch it. And obviously I zoomed in a little bit and stabilized it, and so you could really see that final leg, which is so fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, to your point, like paddling defensively is part of racing, right? Like anybody who's raced long enough has encountered at least the desire to want to do that at one junction or another. So I think it's fair to say that Dave was no longer trying to go from point A to point B as fast as he could, and he went out of his way to play defense. The question to me becomes, is that against the rules? Is that okay? And I think that's like, you'll get people on either side of the coin there. To me, like, I guess pitch this back to you in the sense of like, is it in the spirit of racing? Like racing theoretically is trying to go as fast as you can, right? But the other side of racing is trying to win and beat other people. Yeah. So to me, it's defined, or it depends on how you define racing in this case, about what's okay and what's not. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think on those points?
So a couple things. One, there was Jake, being the race director, did make a couple statements about what you can and can't do. And I think it was, in retrospect, listen, looking from above, that God's eye view that no one actually has, except for kind of the person behind. Like the only person who actually sees the true impact is the person behind. I think it was like on the hairy edge there. Again, I think unintentionally on the hairy edge. But here's what I would say, no matter what. Open course racing, it's not time trial, is you racing against the people on the water. And it's you don't have to be faster than the bear kind of thing, right? You just have to be faster than the next guy to that line. And it doesn't, so in other words, you don't need to be the fastest that you can be on that day. You just need to manage the course well. And that means all kinds of stuff. But one of them is, I think, defensive paddling to some extent. And listen, defensive paddling is everything from, well, I'm at the front of the draft train, I'm going to slow the pace down, to that's a better line over there and they're behind me, I'm going to make some wash and probably pump my board on the way over and get on that line before they do. All fair game. And then you have what we saw in that video where Dave is veering around. And I think that, like, honestly, from where we were sitting on the beach looking at it, you couldn't tell. And I know when I'm like, the only way you realize that you're really yawing how much you really are is by like being able to look up. I have zero doubt that Dave knew he was playing defense. I mean, he might say differently. We have to have him on, by the way. But he knew he was playing defense. I suspect if you said this is what it's going to look like from a drone, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to probably back off that a little
bit. Yeah.
But the thing is I don't think that when you're trying to draft someone who sort of yaws a lot, as an example, they don't realize it. They know they're kind of heading off course here and there, but I don't think I've been behind people who are really good paddlers who just like start getting tired or whatever. And it's like, are you for real with like the direction you are going in right now? And they're like, oh my God, sorry, dude. Like you're redlining, paddling really hard. So
I think in this case, it feels a little different to me in the sense that both Jake and Dave are very accomplished paddlers.
Mm-hmm.
I would be blown away if Dave didn't know what he was doing.
I think he knew what he was doing. I just think he didn't but knowing what it looked like from the drone afterwards. So we'll there's so many reasons to have Dave Beatty on the podcast, sure. But we'll have to ask him, because I'm just telling you, having seen it from the water, it just was sort of like, oh yeah, he's doing a thing. But
right.
Because we saw Jake stand up.
More incriminating from above.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And so
I guess my question in terms of, is it okay or is it not for racing in general? To me, all comes down to like whatever the rules that were communicated for that event. Right. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, I don't really think it matters one way or the other, so long as everybody knows what the rules are and then those rules are followed for a given race.
Yep.
Right. So like you and I have toyed around with rules about making contact or deviating from, or like having certain angles of contact or whatever. They're, maybe hard to enforce or nitpicky or whatever reason we haven't really pushed on any one of those rules to come to fruition. But uh, to me, and I realize this is why Jake was, communicative afterward about like, hey, I'm feeling a certain way about this, was that we did have rules that we were trying to implement for the first time at the race. And he felt like they were kind of overlooked. But to your point, really hard to tell from the side, and you don't have live, from where you were in the commentating booth, you can't see the drone live. So hard to make that call in the moment for sure.
Yeah. And I think, Jake, I think the main thing was that, like, again, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the live call and see how I just went on and on. I think it was his main thing was like, dude, if you see what actually happened. Although I will say the one thing, and actually will describe the thing I kept talking about, and I actually loved it. I thought that Jake was, again, from our viewpoint, it looked like he was driving onto Dave's rail. Like, this is the perception from the beach. And I was like, that's sweet. Like, he's sort of getting on his rail and Dave's not going to be able to use his paddle there. What I didn't realize is they were like literally in like that much water.
Yeah, which you can see in the drone a little bit.
You can. Yeah. So there was so much going on. And in retrospect, we should have just been heads down looking at the drone the whole time. And, there's a lot of things we learned. But the bottom line is I do think we need a rule because, practicing racing, like the things we're doing on that Sunday morning race I was just talking about that I did this morning, is most of what we're doing is practicing drafting and sort of like engaging with drafts and all that kind of stuff. And if you know what the rules of the road are for overtaking, then you'll just apply it to all the races you do, and you're not going to wind up in a really big race where there's different rules. I mean, this is the benefit of having a sort of one rule book to guide them all, instead of adapting rules for boats, which are way more expensive and fragile in a lot of cases, and like just contact's forbidden. Whereas in SUP, I mean, I like the contact. I mean, I sort of the first time that those two kind of came together, I was like, that's kind of cool. But
I think most folks would agree with you that some form of rubbing is racing is the correct answer.
Yeah. Can I propose the rule that I would have?
Yeah. Bring it, man.
So here's what I think. I think, you can do whatever you want on the course until your board is overlapped. And now,
define overlapped. Like a nose is in front of your nose?
My nose is now beyond the very back end, the transom of your board, so to speak.
Okay.
That much. Overlapped. Visibly overlapped, we'll call it. And the second that happens, you now have to maintain both boards have to maintain direct line to the next mark as is reasonable.
Ooh, I don't know if I'm into this. Let me attempt to poke holes, and you can tell me where maybe I don't understand. Okay, so if boards are really close to each other, board one is in front, board two is behind. Board one is in front, board two is behind.
Yes.
If they're close to each other, that totally makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean close to each other this way.
Yes.
If they're like this and then this happens, does that rule still apply?
Okay. Good question. So the rule, actually, let me add another line, which I wasn't quite thinking about. I thought about before, but it didn't explain. If you make contact, deviating from direct
contact.
Line. Yeah. So it's the contact. Cool. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, you're right.
Makes sense.
If you are spread out by 100 yards, no problem. You can do whatever you want. If you are the board in front and you deviate and make contact, oh, I lost my focus.
That's why I went with the pencils. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. Then you suffer a penalty of some sort, because you are essentially the stand-on vessel at that point. Similarly, the overtaking guy or gal is stand-on as well until it's done. And if you get sucked into each other, which is likely to happen if you're super close, no problem. You just have to be making effort to go down to the movement to the next mark. This rule would turn off, I would propose, like 2, maybe 3 board lengths, but I would say 2 is easier. 2 board lengths from any turn, where you switch into now buoy turn rules, where it's a whole different ball game.
I have one other question, I guess, then would be if your shortest path from point A to point B is a curve, you're coming around a corner somewhere, there's kind of like a long looping turn that follows the coast of wherever you're paddling or whatever, so that now this board one is in front and is kind of curving this way. So does that curve, like if I just want to take that a little wider to play defense on, you see where I'm going with this,
yes.
right?
So a
so
curve
I can see,
is really different from a mark. You're talking about something pretty gentle in all likelihood.
But isn't a lot of races.
I think you're still heading to the next mark. So at this point, I think if you're trying to overtake from inside the curve and you overlap, that person's still going as straight as they can for the next mark, which they probably would have been doing anyways. The thing I like about rules like this is I like making board position somewhat strategic. I like the idea that being in side draft has implications beyond being in side draft, as an example, that you might be better off, in like rear draft, as an example, for certain scenarios, because you want to figure out, like, maybe there is a curve coming up and now you want to get into side draft and force that, I like that you then, for your strategies for things like drafting, overtaking, etc., that there's ramifications. And honestly, you might want someone yawing off, like you might feint like you're passing on their left and they yaw off to block you, and now you put in a huge burst and overlap them on the right and they're facing the wrong way and you're launched. And I think actually Jake did make that effort and then just wound up making contact and standing up like, dude,
right.
And still almost pulled it off. It was really impressive. I mean, it was a very fun race to watch for second and third there.
I think that's why this example in particular was interesting to me, is that Jake clearly had more gas and more speed left for that. Like, if not for contact, my money would have been on Jake passing Dave. No shot to Dave, obviously, but it just looked like he had more gas in the tank. Yeah. He was going to pull it off.
They were both so impressive in that race.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were both flying and they're both great paddlers, but I think that's why this example is like, it looked pretty clear to me that Jake had the juice to make the pass.
Yep.
And that option was taken away from him. And, whether that's good defense or breaking of rules, who the hell knows?
I'm going to say it again. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do love this rule that you've come up with. I think it's a pretty easy one to follow and implement too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy, like, self-governing rule, as well as the person who, whether you're following or leading, right? Like, when your nose hits somebody else's board, and as somebody who's being followed, when somebody bonks your board too. It's a pretty easy thing to know. It's a binary yes or no. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I like the simplicity of it.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it might require the person overtaking to actually call out something, because it can be hard to see, like, when that moment happens, but I don't know. I mean, like, it's just generally, I like the idea that, like, if you think someone's about to overtake you, don't screw around or get a good look. My favorite thing was that I hadn't seen till I was editing that thing was Dave's look over his shoulder.
I mean, we've all been there too, especially when you're running out of steam.
Yeah.
Like, how much room do I really have here?
It was such a good race. And I will tell you, just having been on the beach and having been trying to block someone and having been blocked and all that kind of stuff, I am certain that Dave had zero idea how acute those angles were, because it was like 30 degrees, it was, but no, it was a great race nonetheless. Sorry, Jake. Dave, very crafty. But yeah, I think I'd love to bounce the rule off both those guys, because now they get a chance to see that race. It's very unusual. I mean, even for guys like them who race in pretty big races, to get that kind of view of yourself all tangled up. Hopefully Dave sees this and sounds off. I'd love to get his take, and we got to get Jake on here too, because the course designs for that weekend were like awesome,
perfect,
so good. And I wish we had, you can go online on YouTube and see all of the races, long, short, cuts, whatever. But yeah, there you have it. I think it's another rule. I think we're beginning to kind of get towards buoy turns, boat drafting. Now we've got overtaking. They kind of keep popping up. You know what I kept thinking about was I can't remember what year, and we've talked about it before, and I think we've actually maybe even done video of it before. When Claudio Nica grabbed Noah Gariud's board.
Yeah, we did a whole thing.
Yeah, and I can't remember, that might have been podcast 1 or 2. But I thought about that in this sort of like, that was a moment where their boards hit. And I think they both would have been like in the right, like there would have been no violation there as a result of this rule. I was kind of bouncing it off of like, what if things happened? You know, they were both just charging towards the next mark and their boards hit.
I see what you're getting at. Yeah, that definitely seems like a safe, like shit happens scenario where rubbing is racing, carry on, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's still on their board. You're both in medal contention still in that scenario, and paddle it out, right? No one really got the better or worse of that scenario.
Yeah. So lessons learned, I think we'll probably apply them to the next USA SUP National Championship. And that's a race that you're familiar with, right? You've done the Low Country Boil, haven't you? Or is that, or
I've done it
no?
once.
Okay.
I did it once. Yeah. I didn't make it there this past year, but John's Batson has been putting on an amazing race there for, I don't know exactly how many years. I want to say like at least 6, maybe.
Yeah.
Could be wrong about that. And every year he's tried to do something new and different and add and evolve the race, which is really amazing. And everything I've ever heard from any paddle athlete who's ever been there, whether it's stand-up, surf ski, or outrigger, thoroughly enjoys the race. It's super well run. Everyone's really pleasant. The courses are always great. One of the best post-race lunches I've ever had, which for me really puts a race pretty high up in my rankings. I'm all about the lunch. And we're really psyched to have them be the host of the next USA SUP Nationals. It'll be sweet.
Yeah, it's cool. We obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, we USA SUP put on this championship from whole cloth. Like this was from scratch, largely because there's a lot we needed to figure out, work on, see like what it takes, etc. So many good lessons learned. It was still just an amazing event. But all along, I think we were thinking best practice is probably to take an existing race and attach to that in a way that benefits both the existing race and us because of all the organization on the ground support. In a perfect world, and I'm not going to speak for the board, but in a perfect world, I think what we'll do is it'll just rotate around the country in the 7 regions that we've defined. And so every 7 years, it'll be hosted in a new region. My hope is that the race, that certainly the distance race that we did out of Alamitos Bay Yacht Club, that those guys in SoCal will just repeat that. That was such an amazing setting and venue for it. And Jake did such a great course, and there's a lot of really good logistic stuff we can do from that. So hopefully that one sticks around. But the idea is that we'll have SUP specific races, maybe as part of a all vessel kind of race, like the Low Country Boil is.
Sure.
But I think in this race, for people who've done it before, there will be like a SUP start, that's specific, right, so that you're not caught up like, in surf ski wash and all that kind of thing. But more to come. Part 2 on that, a lot of folks will be having their memberships come up for renewal this year. So make sure, if you're not a member, please become a member. If your renewal's up, I got to do it too, by the way, Matt. If your renewal's up, get on that, please. Membership is such a big deal for the organization, and a lot of really cool stuff is happening, like this race and rule making and all sorts of good stuff.
You get a hell of a discount at the national championships by being a member as well. So if you're even thinking about going, I want to say it like gives you all 3 disciplines for like 50% off or something like that, right?
Yeah. It essentially makes it like,
itself.
It makes it a no-brainer from that perspective. There'll be tons of boards to rent, a bunch of local shop, well, not a bunch because not many local, but local shops there, as well as a few board shops down in Florida. I think one's I can't remember the name, SIC dealer focus, and of course the Flying Fish guys are going to be bringing up a bunch of boards. So if you're going, I don't know how I get there with a board, there's ways, first of all. But part 2 is you can get out there and set yourself up for a rental. More will be coming out on that in coming months, but there's no reason not to attend if you really want to. there's airfare, there's lodging, and all that kind of stuff. But what an amazing spot too. I mean, Hilton Head area is.
Hilton Head's great. It's an easy place to fly in and out of too, which is cool. It's kind of built around tourism. So if you're not local and you do want to come to the race, it's an easy peasy thing to do. The courses in years past have always just been so cool. It's generally flat, somewhat protected water, but it is salt water. So you kind of get a little bit of conditions, but if you're not used to huge conditions, it's not like paddling in the open ocean or anything like that.
Right.
The weather is generally pretty sweet in Hilton Head in September, where it's, last year was pretty toasty, and the year before that as well, I suppose, was pretty steamy, but it's not going to be cold for sure, which is nice, especially for the morning races. You're kind of warmed up by the time you walk to the water. You're already sweating and ready to go. I think John sponsors us with some electrolytes for the race too, which is nice.
Yeah, huge community support too, with sponsorships race. And stuff. To your point about the lunch,
whole city of Hilton Head really kind of comes up for it, and they do a really nice job supporting the event. And I think feel really fortunate to be invited to be a part of the event.
Yeah, so we've got it's race season, man. Carolina Cup is around the corner. Bunch of races
2 months out.
Yeah, cooking up here. I mean, it's happening. We're back into it. You and I will continue in the new format. Let us know what you think. And hopefully we'll be able to kind of rip these out post significant races, or just when we see something worth talking about, and kind of get back on the train here. Off season's over. You and I need to get back to work on the pod.
Gotta get our shit together. Yep.
It's all time. Right, man. I think we covered it, didn't we?
I think we did. I think we sped through it. This is good stuff.
Yeah. Hey, I hope for both Dave and Jake, appreciate them allowing us to. Well, we didn't check first, but I think they knew we were going to get into. But I appreciate just their engagement. Frankly, at the event, they were both super fun to hang out with. But I know that they'll be into this conversation because it really helps just advance the sport. As more we can get clarity on expectations and that kind of stuff. I still listen. As a 49-year-old dude, I'm a huge fan of the 47-year-old guy veering into the path of the young guy. I'm just going to say it. Like, I loved it.
Sure. Yeah. Not biased at all.
No. I mean, even watching it back, I'm like, oh, that's pretty intense. Way to go, Dave. But all good. But anyways, thanks for watching, Matt. Good to see you back here on the pod, and more to come.
Likewise. Thanks.